Across the story of Dawntrail, your character is made to fight a variety of foes. But one type of enemy has repeated a surprising amount of times across not only the MSQ, but side stories as well. That being the massive magical beasts known as the Tural Vidral. But why are they so excessively violent, and how do they relate to the Auspice of the Far East? Gather round, my friends, for today we'll explore just that. First, we need to ask ourselves, what is a Vidraal? The Vidral are animals that were once known as relatively normal creatures that suddenly and dramatically evolved into something greater. The exact reason behind how and why is relatively unknown, but the end result is always the same. A creature that lived a long and likely eventful life, suddenly growing beyond their natural lifespan and typical range of etheric powers. This strange evolution comes with a few perks, getting to live centuries or even millennia longer than normal, becoming much more self-aware as they obtain higher levels of intelligence, well beyond any normal creature. And lastly, they gain some kind of unique magical powers. This could either be an improved version of a talent they already possessed in life, or a brand new set of arcane skills that have little to do with their original form. However, even after ascending and gaining all of these wonderful gifts, most records of the Vidral are stained in blood. These creatures that grew beyond their mortal limits suddenly became even more violent and hateful than ever before. And with their brand new powers, the average adventurer or hunter stands very little chance against them. In fact, the emergence of the Vidral is the entire reason jobs like Viper sprang into existence, as the Vipers themselves trained to become hunters of apex creatures. Normally, the Vidral would simply be called another monster, and no one would think too hard about it. However, we already met similar creatures in the past, and their behavior couldn't be more different. Way back in the stories of Stormblood, we happened upon a group of creatures who had undergone the exact same etheric evolution. However, in the Far East, they are known as the Auspice. Since I have already covered the Auspice in detail, I'll not waste too much time discussing them. But the Auspice that we encounter in Stormblood, for the most part, couldn't be more different than the Vidral. They use their higher intellect to think more for themselves, grow beyond their primal desires, and inspire similar greatness within those around them. As far as we know, more than a dozen or so Auspice have already followed these teachings and grown beyond their base desires over the years, becoming something greater. Eventually, their powers and legends became so grand that the locals of places like Hingashi began to call them kami, or gods, which to the average person they might as well be. But why? What ultimately sets the Auspice apart from the Vidral if both creatures are formed from the same kind of evolution? How come the Auspice became legendary guardians in folklore, while the Vidral are nothing but wild menaces? After poring over the lore a few times over to find this defining difference, I believe the answer is much more simple than we think. To the Auspice, there was once an act of kindness that united their vision once upon a time. A force of character and will that inspired them so much that they would build their entire existence around those teachings. And that was the influence of Tenzen. The story of Tenzen and the Four Lords is one of the most well-known and popular tales to be told in the Far East. The story of a mortal man traveling the land with four divine beasts, bringing peace and justice wherever they strode. It's enough to inspire any child upon hearing it, but I can cover the story of Tenzen himself in much greater detail at a later date. Suffice to say, his heroism, kindness, and sacrifice was so profound that even after all these centuries later, the Auspice, known as the Four Lords, still remember him very clearly. Tenzen had inspired them, these evolved creatures, to be so much more than the monsters people would assume they'd be, becoming the quiet guardians of the Far East to honor the memory of their most beloved friend. the man who taught them so much and gave them companionship when all others would turn away. It's entirely possible that without the influence of Tenzen, that the Auspice would have fallen into the same impulsive habits that the Vidral do. For example, not all Auspice in the Far East are revered for being kind and just entities. An Auspice known as Koryu was likely just as dangerous and violent as Valigarmanda, but Tenzen valiantly sacrificed himself to seal the raging Auspice away for thousands of years. And even the Four Lords themselves must face what they call the Aramitama, or their inner rage, in order to live peacefully. Think of it like ritual combat to get their more impulsive desires out of their system, to balance their humors. However, this suggests that the tremendous amount of ether and power an Auspice or Vidral gains from their evolution is intoxicating. It's as the old saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and these animals would appear to be no exception. These were once normal creatures, and without a reason to mature beyond their more primal impulses and instincts, they won't. They likely go mad with power, reveling in their ability to sit at the top of the food chain without much effort. But we've actually seen similar behavior in the victims of Garlemald's hypertuning experiments. While it's true that the Garleans these experiments are performed on become much more powerful than normal, with abilities they'd likely never possessed before, every single one of them had lost their minds to some degree. Their bodies and minds twisted by the experiments so thoroughly that no rational person would ever say that they're physically a Garlean anymore. Far too much ether, chemicals, and technology has been infused with their body, leaving them nothing but a crazed and battle-hungry beast. How familiar. But while hypertuning is a man-made instance of etheric infusion, the Vidral and Auspice gain their power from a strange nature-driven method. And yet, this would not only help explain the violent tendencies of the Tural Vidral, but also why there's no real records of many kind and patient Auspice before the arrival of Tenzen. It's entirely possible that these remarkably godlike creatures can't stop themselves from going wild on their own. Someone or something needs to guide them in a better direction before they give in to these desires completely and lose themselves to animalistic impulse. Because it would appear that once they give in, there's no going back. And the only real peace a Vidral will find at that point is at the end of a viper's blade. So far, it would appear that the guiding influence of Tenzen is ultimately what sets the Vidral and Auspice apart from one another. It's very possible that a Tural Vidral did manage to overcome its base impulses and reach a form of enlightenment, but if such a creature exists, it likely has chosen to stay away from the affairs of mortal men and women, not wishing to be confused with a rampaging Vidral and hunted by vipers. But as for now, we don't have any real evidence to suggest that there's a group of wise Vidral congregating in the West like we see in the Far East with the Auspice. But that's not to say people don't have theories. For example, some suggest that this was an intention of the ancients, a sort of blessing that lies dormant, giving them the chance to mature beyond their creator's vision. If so, then perhaps being sundered has caused something to go wrong. They aren't supposed to go mad with power, but they do. Other researchers believe it's due to an overabundance of natural ether in a given region, and some even assert that the lack of an apex predator like dragons and behemoths leaves just enough room for an animal to evolve on their own in mysterious ways. However, this is all theoretical at the end of the day, and ultimately pure conjecture. However, that will be all from me for now. Tell me, what does the history of Tenzen tell you about the wisdom and patience of the Auspice? What mysterious conditions need to be fulfilled for a creature to evolve into a Vidral or Auspice? And is the presence of excessive ether truly what drives these creatures to go feral without guidance? All of these are interesting questions, and as always, I'm eager to hear your thoughts down below. Be sure to let me know your stance on the nature of these magical beings as we move through the setting of Dawntrail. But, until we meet again, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoy my content, it would mean the world to me if I had earned you as a subscriber. We are currently on the road to 50k, and I'd love to have you as part of that journey. I'd also like to take this time to thank my amazing Patreon supporters: Nanima, Amina Viltaria, Slippers, Azkan Hawk, Naria O'Meara, Potato, Seth Rosewood, and Sinalv Bagel. Your support has always meant so much to me and helps to keep the content flowing with ease. If you're interested, there are additional links down in the description to my Discord, X, and other things as well. But until I see you again, I hope you're having an amazing day. Class dismissed.